Fleming in the Philippines here. I hope you're all well. And since you're all under house arrest like me, you've got time to listen to me. When is trans not trans? Now, we've talked about, HSTS and AGPs and all that sort of thing. And we understand, I think if you watch the channel, you read my blog, you know my books, you know the difference between the basic forms of, shall we say, conventional gender dysphoria, which are fairly well understood and have been widely written about. There's still some dispute, but the dispute is not really viable. We know how it works. In recent years, we've seen a new form arrive, and this kind of looks like gender dysphoria, but actually it isn't. It's a mass hysteria. But these are actually trans in the sense that the people who exhibit them actually transition. They actually do change their presentation, at least. And often they'll want more than just presentational change. They'll want hormones and surgery and things like that to complete this. And that is true also of the new ROGD form, as it was of the traditional, which I would call true gender dysphoric types. But there's another type, and this really appeared soon after 2010, but it started to become a big problem. And in this, people claim to be trans, but they make no effort to be trans. They just don't do it. And in this idea is that because gender is in feminist theory, gender isn't real. You don't have to appear to be a woman in order to be a woman. Same was the case with, for example, I think you might remember Rachel Dolezal, or Donna Dolezal, I think she was called, who had claimed to be a black activist for many years. Turned out she was actually a white. But she said, but I don't have to be black to be black, and we had another one, Dave, or Moscato, who was an American USican student political leader, and dapper little suit, and the cheap beard and all the rest of it. And he was absolutely certain that he was a woman, and he would have to be addressed as a woman by feminine pronouns and all the rest of it, even though he made absolutely no attempt whatsoever. None. Absolutely zero concession. He appeared to be a man, he behaved like a man, he was in every way a conventional guy, except, well, I'm a woman because I say I am. Now, this leads us into something else. There is a big problem at the moment with a thing called self-identification. Now, when I have used this term in the past, I have tended to be referring to the 2004 Gender Recognition Act in the UK, which was up for amendment in order to make it easier for people to claim the gender recognition certificate, which at the moment involves you have to live as a woman for 2 years, you have to have 2 certificates confirming your gender dysphoria, a few other little things, but basically you have to be confirmed as actually being trans. You actually are living in the gender that you're claiming, and that the self-identification in the context of that is simply simplifying that and saying, well, do you have to actually go through all these lengths? Can you just not produce some slightly simpler evidence and do it online? And that was what that argument was all about. But it's gone away now because the government has plenty of other things to think about. That one ain't coming back, and not in the foreseeable future anyway. So self-identification in that sense, in the sense of the 2004 Gender Recognition Act, is basically it's dead. It's gone. So the problem is that self-identification has another meaning, and it has another meaning particularly for USicans, because they don't have the GRA, of course. For them, it's the people like Dave Moscato who are saying, well, I'm a woman, obviously, because I have a beard and I wear a suit and I behave like a guy, but I say I'm a woman, therefore I must be a woman. And it's that sense of self-identification that they are pushing. And it's a nonsense. It's a total bloody nonsense. Of course they're not women. If you want to be a woman, you're going to have to look like one. Oh dear, oh my God, gender stereotypes. So what? Gender stereotypes are actually real. Gender is not a social construct. It's innate. So you just have to live with the conditions that it puts on you. There's no way around that one. If you want people to accept you as a woman, you have to bloody well look like a woman. I mean, how dumb do you have to be to think it could be any different? But, you know, at the back of this is feminism, and feminism does not want for dumbness. When it comes to stupidity, they got it. They got it in spades. So this is what the big problem is. Now, what has happened as a result of this? And it gets even better. It's just remarkable how feminism shoots itself in the foot. How stupid it is. How can they be so stupid? I mean, is there actually something about women that makes them this stupid? Or is it just feminists? I think it's just feminists, maybe, because they're only about 5% of women. Most women are actually okay, you know, they've got common sense and brains. It's just feminists that they kind of fell out on the floor on them, I don't know where, somewhere along the line. Anyway, the problem now arises because you have people who appear to be men, like Dave Moscato, and there's quite a few of them there, high profile ones, demanding to be able to use women's facilities because they self-identify as women. They say, no, I'm a woman, and therefore I must be able to use a woman's changing room, even though, you know, I look like a guy, I've got a beard, I've got a suit, you know, I mean, I'm not an advocate of, I'm not suggesting here, by the way, just as an aside, I think it's ridiculous to ask a transsexual that she must have, you know, major surgery in order to confirm her gender status. But she's got to play the role of a woman. You know, she's got to act and look like a woman. You know, and okay, fair enough, she tucks. But just taking off your suit and having a big hairy chest and a huge beard and a big tadger and saying I'm a woman, that is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And yet that's what they're doing. So feminists are then up in arms saying, my God, we can't have this. These are men invading women's spaces. They're men using feminist ideology. Do you people not get that? Do you not see what's happened here? That feminist ideology has caused these men to exist. Without that, without the feminist idea that gender is just a social construct and therefore could be changed at will by anyone, then this could not possibly happen. It wouldn't be possible. These people would not exist. They could not exist. You know, we've had trans people, we know we've had trans people for as long as we've had writing, certainly, and probably much longer. Because we know that they existed in non-literate societies and still do. They all looked like women. If they started off men, they looked like women. And a smaller number, if they started off as women, looked like men. But they all made that effort. They all made that basic understanding that gender defines you. That's what you are. It's not a social construct. It's what you are. And if you want to fit in society in a particular way, then you have to conform to that. And as an interesting aside, you know, I live in the Philippines, and in the Philippines, the largest form of male to male attraction, if you like, male gender nonconformity, male homosexuality, if you like, is a thing called kabaklaan in Luzon in the north here. And this is based on, it's the lifestyle of the bakla. A bakla is a trans woman, or a feminine gay or a trans woman. And there are very few masculine gays here, very few. It's not a cult that has really taken on because it's just outnumbered. Anyway, it's been mentioned by many writers and scholars in this area that, and it's observable, you know, you can just go out and see it. Kabaklaan is not transgressive. Kabaklaan does not set out to change society. It just sets out to fit into society, okay? Kabaklaan is a way in which people who are, you know, a bit different can fit in without causing problems, and it's all accepted, it's fine. You know, they do fit in. They are accepted. It's really not an issue. Transgender in the West, unfortunately, during the 1980s, but maybe most noticeably the 1990s, became transgressive. It became a political movement determined to destroy society, and determined to destroy it along feminist lines. It's amazing, you know, transgenders were actually using feminist logic. You can actually take this back to two books if you want. Both of them are pretty, they're not great reads, you know, but they're interesting. One is called the Transsexual Empire by Janice Raymond. It was actually her PhD thesis, and I read it in the form that it was first published, which was grim. She has subsequently rewritten it, and apparently it's a lot better, but I have not actually read that one. I got the original one when it came out. And the other one is a book called The Empire Strikes Back by a trans woman called Sandy Stone. And if you read these two, they really set the two opposing points of view up. And what you'll find if you actually read them is that it's all about territory. The idea at the bottom of all this is that being woman is not just a conceptual or a theoretical claim. It's a territorial one. Women, that is natal women, have the right to that territory called woman, right? And trans women don't. And on the other hand, the Sandy Stone argument is that trans women have just as much right to that territory as women do. Raymond's book appeared first. Stone's response appeared later, obviously. But they do really set the ground rules for this argument as it has proceeded forward. Now, a problem is that the transtrenders, that is the ones who don't make any effort to actually transition, but call themselves transitioners or call themselves transgender, they usually just call themselves trans. They've adopted the position broadly outlined by Sandy Stone, and they've said, no, I'm trans, and therefore I have all these rights, despite the fact that I don't actually do any work for them. There is an idea in society that there is an economic equivalence, that if you do certain things, you get certain privileges. And the whole trans idea is kind of against that. It doesn't want to do that. The transgenders, they don't want to actually be trans. They just want the privileges that trans people have. And quite realistically, quite naturally, natal women, to a lesser extent perhaps men, but also trans women, both HSTS and AGP, are reacting very strongly against this. They're saying, well, no, wait a minute, I do all these things, look at my girlfriend, look at Sam, has been on hormones since she was 13. And she's had to make a lot of sacrifices in her life to be what she is and who she is now, and which is a beautiful young woman. She's not very happy about the idea of somebody in a suit with a beard strolling in and saying, I can have everything you have, and I don't have to do anything. So there's this idea of the territory that is woman, and those who have access to it, or those who have the privilege of access to it. And I'm not talking about physical territory, I'm talking about conceptual territory here now. Now, there's within more modern forms of feminism, the intersectional type, which is it's also insane, but in a different way. They've actually accommodated the more traditional forms of transsexualism, of transgenderism anyway, and they said, well, no, okay, it's fine. That idea of being able to enter our space or to have a claim on this territory is okay because you're oppressed too. So because they use this Foucauldian idea of oppression to try and define things rather than the strictly physical or the ideas of gender differentiation. They look at the extent to which you are oppressed by society, as if you were anyway. We'll leave aside the fact that this just involves a whole load of inventing oppressions that don't exist to some other time. So they're a little bit different, but the mainstream of third wave or second wave feminism rather has become somewhat less active in the United States because it's moved on there. But in the UK, it's rampant. You've got a big problem just now because you have people like Kellyanne Minchell, who goes under the ridiculous title of Posy Parker, who's a rabid TERF. She says that she's no longer a rabid feminist, but in fact she's not a rabid feminist because the rabid feminists are not rabid enough for her. And she takes the Janice Raymond point and takes it even further, and this is causing real problems. To an extent, I have sympathy because if I were a woman, which I'm not, and a guy just walked into the toilet that I was using, and he's got a beard and he's wearing a suit or whatever, a set of jeans, and started demanding to use the space and demanding to be called a woman, then yeah, I would feel a bit strange about it, to put it mildly. But there's a difference between that and someone like Sam walking in, and you know, Sam's totally passable. I mean, who's going to know if Sam, Blair White, any of these people walk into the toilet and use it? They're not going to know. And this is where the issue gets really tight, because the transtrenders absolutely resent this idea of passing, and what they call passing privilege. And they call people like Sam, and like Blair White, and the ones that you might know, HSTS like that, they call them true scum, because they actually look like what they claim to be. And that's regarded by the transtrenders as a betrayal of their totally screwed up trans ideology. And you have to ask yourself a little bit, well, how the blazes did all this come about? So let's just go back a little bit. And at the time of the row between Dennis Raymond and Sandy Stone, a lot of other academics, Sandy Stone wasn't an academic, but many academics got involved on the trans side, and they were all AGPs. None of them, as far as I know, were actually HSTS. There were no true transsexuals, in other words. They were all, you know, transvestite transitioners, basically. And they took up the cudgels and started yelling and shouting and doing the things that, yeah, as we know, AGPs are also very, very good at. As a result of that, the so-called trans movement became, during the 90s, it became markedly transgressive. It changed from being about, there wasn't really a movement to start with, but when the movement did arrive and did sort of coalesce, it became a political movement whose intention was, like the LGBT spaghetti political movement, and like radical feminism, its aim was radical change of society along basically Marxist lines, Marxist, neo-Marxist, doesn't matter. They were looking for essentially a communist society. They wanted what they call egalitarian, what most of us would just call plain old communism. What's happened is that the new generation, these transtrenders, they've fixated on this idea of trans as being transgressive, as being challenging to society, but they reject the idea of having to actually change your presentation, public presentation, in order to go along with that. Because what they're saying is that, you know, if you do that, you're actually going along with what society is demanding. And that's the society we want to break, remember. That's the one we want to destroy. So if as soon as you say, oh, I'm trans and, you know, I'm going to put on a dress and have my hair done, if you're a guy, you know, if you start off as a guy, then you're a traitor. You mustn't do that. What you have to do is wear a suit and a beard and say you're a woman, because that's so much more politically transgressive. That allows you the, what could we call this? The political honesty of not going along with the demands of the society that you actually want to destroy. But what you have to understand is that when we look at these people, what we have to understand is that what they want to destroy, what they actually want, what the real purpose of all of this is the destruction of society. They want to wreck Western society completely. They don't believe in what we have developed over the last 300 years, more or less, since the Enlightenment. Really, I would argue since the Renaissance, but, you know, I'm a classicist. 500 years of history, they want it erased. They want to replace it with this neo-Marxist world where the, you know, these ideas like gender don't exist. You know, because there is absolutely no inequity. There's no difference. You know, as soon as you have difference, you have inequality. It's as simple as that. They want to get rid of all of that. So their purpose is to destroy the society. And they see that, their thinking is that if they go along with the demands of society in terms of appearance, then they're selling out. You know, and that's why they're so horrible. That's why they're such unpleasant people, is because, you know, people, they'll say, you know, I'm trans, and some people will laugh at them. They go, what's trans about you? You get these silly little girls with blue hair. Oh, I'm trans. And you go, what? I'm wearing, you know, women's clothing. And you say, oh, really? And were you on hormones? Oh, no. Oh, that's for true scum. That's for true scum. That's what they do. They go on hormones. We don't. But what makes you trans? I'm trans because I say I'm trans. right? That's the whole point. And it's that kind, to get back to where we were, it's that kind of self-identification that is the problem. That's the one that we must not accept. You just simply cannot accept it. People must respect the society that they live in, and therefore they must go along with the gender norms that exist within that society. Okay? So if you want to be called a woman, you have to look like a woman. If you want to be called a man, you have to look like a man. I mean, I have trans men friends here, and they're great. I love drinking a beer with them because they're a hoot. But they make the effort, And I have obviously loads of trans women friends, but I'm not really allowed to talk to them because Sam don't like it, She has territorial issues. But that's normal, that's the way it is. I'm not meant to get too chummy with natal women either because I'm a guy and my girlfriend don't like it. That's all completely normal. That's the way it is, These people are making the effort to appear to be what they claim to be, and everybody just goes along with it. It's fine. It's not transgressive because Quebec is not transgressive. The purpose of transgender, which is a kind of translation of Quebec, but it's not a very good one, in the Philippines, is not to break society, but to accommodate it, to fit in. And that's what the transgenders hate. And their side of the argument has hated this really since about 1970. If you look at within what became LGB originally, if you look at the original gay movements, male gay movements, they were what was called assimilationist. And their idea was, we'll just try and fit into society. In 1970, or just about 1970, they became strongly anti-assimilationist, they became strongly transgressive, and the purpose at that point became, let's change society. And I mean, I could run the quotes, but essentially the purpose of LGB, and later LGBT spaghetti, has been the destruction of the traditional gender roles of male and female, of men and women, the destruction of the nuclear family, and the eradication of the traditional society that we all built together. That's the point of these things. That's what they're up to. And what transgenders are doing is they're saying, well, we're trans, but we're not going to accommodate the society which we hate by appearing to be trans. We're just going to say we're trans, and screw you. And, a lot of this is to do with extremely spoiled, badly brought up children. And, people telling children that they can be anything they want to be. People telling children that that they have the right to be everything they can, be all you can be. Being all you can be is one thing. Being anything is something else, And this is all about spoiled children who've been told that there are no boundaries. They can just do what they want. Well, they can't. I've said in a previous video, I think that we're going to find that a lot of the people who've been pumping this nonsense into their tiny little minds are going to find themselves on a very long dole queue. I couldn't be more happy. If these departments of gender studies and women's studies and whatever studies, if they all close down, then it will be good for the world. It will be a good thing. So it's not entirely black. We still have a hope of being able to get rid of them somehow. Anyway, that's it. That's when trans is not trans. Trans is not trans when it's a transtrender saying it. Okay? Trans is only trans when it's a genuine transsexual or an autogynephilic transitioner, transvestite, call them what you like, doing it. Okay? That's it. Simple as that. Take care. See you soon. Bye.